I was attempting to get used to a life that had abruptly and startlingly stopped after more than 20 years of marriage on a quiet and chilly Saturday night just a few weeks after the divorce papers were finalized. The silence of my previously bustling home felt weird, in sharp contrast to the weekends which used to be filled with laughing and family traditions. One such ritual was our weekly visits to the Starlit Sanctuary, a simple but beloved refuge where my husband's son Jasper and I could relax and reconnect in the warmth and steam. After the divorce, Jasper insisted that we do the ceremony together alone. I first resisted. It was weird, even sad, to continue a custom so entwined with our now broken family unit. However, Jasper's tenacity ultimately won me over. "Come on, Mom," he pushed, his voice light but forceful. "We do not have to let everything change." That evening, I surrendered and packed our belongings before leaving. The Starlit Sanctuary was quiet, as it always is in the winter, and the air within was heavy with the calming perfume of cedarwood and steam. As I went inside, I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time, not only physical but also mental, a warm cocoon against the brutal cold of the outer world. Jasper, at 22, had developed significantly over the years. He was no longer the young child who used to play around in the tiny pool, generating waves for joy. Instead, he was a poised young man, tall with broad shoulders and a serene assurance that reflected his maturity. Nonetheless, his gentle, familiar eyes radiated a warmth that reminded me of his father. We took a seat in a private family steam room, which was cozy without being stuffy. We spent a calm time while sitting side by side on the wooden bench, covered in towels and immersed in soothing steam. Jasper broke the stillness with a subtle, "You seem better." His tone was hesitant, almost apprehensive. I gave him a startled look. "Better? Since everything?" His eyes caught mine briefly before moving away. "It's been a difficult few months," he continued, taking a deep breath. I felt the steam relax my shoulders. "I'm not sure about better," I said honestly, "perhaps just adapting." He nodded, and his countenance softened. "That's something," he added. For a time, we sat in contemplative stillness. The regular hiss of steam filled the room, relaxing my mind. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of tranquility. Jasper leaned back against the wooden wall, and I couldn't help but admire how much he'd grown, not only physically but emotionally. He had become my anchor throughout the divorce, providing steadfast support without being asked. The minutes passed, and I realized how much I cherished these moments with him. The turbulent, often cruel world outside felt distant, and within this warm haven, it was just the two of us, bonded by something more than blood. "Remember how you would beg to stay in the sauna for hours?" I inquired, breaking the stillness with a little smile. Jasper laughed, a rich, genuine sound that warmed the room more than any steam could. "Yeah, and Dad would usually yank me out after 10 minutes, certain I had overheated." I chuckled, teasing, or because he couldn't take the heat himself. For the first time in months, discussing my ex-husband didn't hurt. We spent the next hour going between the steam room, the pool, and the lounge, reflecting on simpler times. I wondered at how easy it seemed to chat to Jasper and how our friendship had gradually matured over time. He wasn't my only son, he was also a confidant and companion in navigating this unusual, unknown chapter of life. As the evening came to a close, we sat quietly in a corner of the lounge, drinking tea. Jasper stretched out, putting his palms softly on mine. "You'll be okay," he murmured quietly, his voice calm. I fought back tears, astonished by the intensity of his comments. "Do you think so?" I asked. "I know," he said with confidence, "we both will." For the first time in what seemed like forever, I believed him. Our Saturday nights at the Starlit Sanctuary became a reassuring regularity amidst the chaos. In the weeks that followed, each visit seemed like a religious rite, a peaceful escape from the outer world where everything was raw and unpredictable. Our silences were never uncomfortable but rather filled with unspoken understanding. It was on one of these evenings, maybe the third or fourth following the divorce, that I realized how much I looked forward to spending time with Jasper. Not only did he provide relaxation, but also a sense of connection. His presence anchored me, giving a stable anchor in a life that sometimes felt erratic. That night, when I reached the steam room, I noticed him waiting for me with his towel casually slung over his shoulders. There was a lightness about him that hadn't always existed, a calm confidence that made me believe, for the first time in a long time, that we were going to be okay. As I approached, Jasper smiled, and I smiled back immediately. The familiar sight of him gave me a nice feeling that had nothing to do with the starlit sanctuary. "You're late," he mocked, standing aside to let me in. I rolled my eyes and brushed by him with a cheeky look. "I am the one who drives you here. If I'm late, it's on you both." He smiled gently in the wooden chamber as we took our seats on the benches, surrounded by swirling steam that blurred the room's lines. Jasper slumped back, resting his head against the wall, and for a time, I just watched him. I'd seen it before, but something about these evenings heightened my awareness of him. His shoulders dominated the space beside me, and his posture exuded quiet might. He now exuded a serene certainty, a maturity that belied his age. "Are you okay, Mom?" he inquired, his voice disrupting my thoughts. His compassionate eyes, filled with the same care that had helped me through so many difficult times, met mine. I hurriedly agreed, wiping wet hair away from my face. "Of course, I'm only thinking." "What is this about?" he asked. I replied honestly, "How much I enjoy these nights with you." Before I could think about it, I added, "It's good to spend this time together." He grinned, unguarded and warm, which made my chest constrict. "Yeah," he replied gently, "it is." The air between us felt thicker, not unpleasant but charged with something unspoken, as if a truth hung there waiting to be spoken. I wasn't sure how to read that or if Jasper agreed. As we proceeded from the steam room to the plunge pool that night, I noticed minor touches. His gaze lingered on me when he thought I wasn't looking. When he gave me a towel, his hand lightly touched mine. The contact felt to last just a little too long, even though I tried to persuade myself I was imagining it. He was my son, after all. Even as I comforted myself, I couldn't escape the idea that something between us was changing, morphing into something I didn't quite comprehend. By the next visit, I found myself looking forward to it in a new manner. Despite my efforts to conceal it, I couldn't shake the feeling of calm exhilaration. Jasper appeared to sense it as well. His feet were lighter as we entered the starlit sanctuary, and his enthusiasm was clear as he led us to our favorite steam room. As we nestled in and the familiar warmth surrounded us, I couldn't help but feel deeply grateful. Outside, the world was chilly and uncertain, but here we were, alone, cocooned by the steam, and nothing else seemed to matter. That night, we chatted longer than usual, effortlessly transitioning between shared experiences and future hopes. Jasper spoke about his career objectives and ambitions, his voice filled with quiet intensity, and his eyes lit up as he discussed what was important to him. I listened closely, fascinated by his words and the way he portrayed himself. "You are magnificent, do you realize that?" I spoke abruptly, the words rushing out before I could control them. Jasper blinked, and his face softened. "Mom, no." "Seriously," I interrupted, "I do not say it enough. You're such a nice dude, Jasper. Your father and I could not have asked for a greater son." When his eyes met mine, time seemed to stand still. "You're pretty amazing too," he remarked gently. "You have gone through so much, yet you are still here." The way his voice sank on that final word made me shiver, and it had nothing to do with the frigid air outside the steam room. I opened my mouth to answer but couldn't find any words, so I just nodded. Later, as we sat in the lounge, covered in plush blankets and sipping tea, I felt an unexpected sense of contentment wash over me. Jasper was studying me, his look inscrutable. "You know," he remarked abruptly, breaking the silence, "I don't think I've ever felt closer to you than I do now." I stared at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his tone. "Jasper," I started, but he persisted, his eyes steadfast. Recent weeks have been both challenging and rewarding. Spending this much time with you seems like I'm finally seeing you for who you truly are. I wasn't sure how to answer. Something about his words and the way he looked at me seemed to be rearranging everything. The borders between us, which were previously so obvious and defined, appeared to dissolve. For the first time, I didn't know how I felt about it. The next Saturday, the air between us had an obvious weight, a combination of expectation and something deeper, which we both resisted identifying. Jasper welcomed me at the door with his normal smile, but it felt gentler, and his gaze lingered on me for a bit longer than usual. I couldn't deny that there was an electricity between us, despite my attempts to convince myself that it was nothing more than our newfound intimacy. Things felt different at the Starlit Sanctuary. As we returned to our usual practice of rotating between the steam room and the plunge pool, I noticed a subtle shift in our interactions. Jasper seemed more restrained, his manner thoughtful. He finally broke the stillness once we were ensconced in the lounge with warm mugs of tea. "Hey," he said, his tone light yet inquiring, "have you ever received a massage here?" I looked at him over the rim of my cup, taken aback. "No, I have not." "Why are you asking?" He shrugged, a slight smile forming on the corner of his lips. "I just thought that may be an excellent concept. You've appeared anxious recently." I raised an eyebrow, though his opinion was not incorrect. The stress of the divorce and the turmoil in our lives stayed strongly. This astonished me. "Tense, isn't it?" I commented, giggling quietly. "You deserve to unwind," he added, his voice both humorous and honest. "Allow me to book one for you." I waved him off. "Jasper, that isn't required." But he persisted, his light-hearted tone contrasted with the severity in his expression. "Really, let me handle this for you." Before I could argue, he was already at the desk, interacting with the receptionist. When he returned, he smiled triumphantly. "You're all set," he said, though he hesitated and added with a sheepish look, "I may have also scheduled one for myself." I chuckled and shook my head. "Of course you did." The massage was simply wonderful. The therapist's skillful hands released every knot in my back and shoulders. By the conclusion, I felt an unexpected lightness, and my body was entirely relaxed. Jasper was waiting in the lounge afterward, his face beaming. "Well," he asked, bending his head and studying me, "how are you feeling?" I remarked that I felt like I could float out of here, which drew a giggle from him. Good, that was the entire objective. Later that evening, as we rested in one of the smaller steam rooms, Jasper laid down next to me, his motions calm and relaxing. I looked at him, seeing his peaceful demeanor and the serene happiness on his face. "You know," I said, breaking the stillness, "you were correct. That was just what I needed." He smirked, his eyes flashing with mischief. "See, I know what's best for you, Mom." I gently nudged him with my elbow, his words warming me in an inexplicable manner. "Perhaps I should return the favor, I was joking, give you a massage sometime." He lifted an eyebrow, and his grin softened. "Are you making an offer?" I paused, uncertain why his inquiry caused my chest to flutter. "Why not? Fair is fair, right?" Jasper sat up, his eyes more focused. "You don't have to," he added quietly. "I just wanted you to rest tonight." "I know," I responded with a smile, the warmth of the atmosphere making the occasion seem strangely personal, "but I want to. You've done so much for me in the last several weeks, this is the least I can do." Back at home, the mood was calmer yet still imbued with an unusual intensity. Jasper took my offer seriously. Lying face down on the couch with his wide back exposed, I gingerly began massaging the stress out of his shoulders, unsure of the appropriate pressure to use. His happy hum encouraged me, and I felt more assured. "Where did you learn this?" he asked, his voice muffled by the couch. "I did not," I acknowledged while chuckling. "I am simply winging it." Well, your improvisation is quite good, he exhaled softly as his muscles relaxed under my touch. You are a natural. Something in his deep, almost respectful voice made me shudder. I attempted to concentrate on the knots in his back, but the proximity of the situation made it difficult. Is this helpful? I asked gently. He turned slightly to meet my gaze. Yeah, he replied gently, it's quite helpful. For a brief while, the room seemed unnaturally silent, with only the faint hum of the heater. I didn't know what to say or how to react to the implicit weight in his stare. Okay, I murmured finally, removing my hands, that is enough for one night. Jasper sat up slowly and stretched gently. Thank you, Mom, he spoke pleasantly. Really? The tension between us was palpable. The next week in the Starlit Sanctuary, despite the fact that it went unsaid, it was there in the way his gaze lingered on me, in the slight brush of his palm on mine as he gave me a towel. I told myself it was nothing, that I was just imagining things, but the fire that swelled in my chest every time he glanced at me said otherwise. After our normal sequence of steam rooms and plunge pools, we returned to the massage lounge. This time, Jasper did not offer scheduling another appointment. He spoke nonchalantly, reclining back in his chair. I believe I would like another one of your massages. His statements took me off guard, despite my efforts to disguise it. Oh, seriously? Yes, he said, his eyes unwavering. You are better than the pros. I laughed, but it felt too loud in the silent room. Flattery will get you somewhere, Jasper. He grinned, his face soft. That's good to know. Later that night, sitting in bed and reflecting on the events of the evening, I couldn't escape the sensation that something had changed between us. The borders that had once seemed obvious were suddenly blurring, leaving me unclear of how to traverse them. Only one thing was certain, I was looking forward to next Saturday more than I cared to confess. The next Saturday, I found myself running late, a business email had delayed me, so I dashed downstairs to find Jasper standing by the front door. My breath caught when I saw him clutching roses. Jasper, I replied, gazing at the bouquet in his hands. The bouquet consisted of white lilies and delicate pink roses, elegant, modest, and very stunning. What is this? He shrugged, his demeanor somewhat bashful. I just felt you earned them. Mom, you've been fantastic recently. I wanted to do something nice for you. My heart filled with his words, and my throat tightened as I received the bouquet. You didn't have to do this, I said, but my smile revealed how much the gesture meant to me. I wanted to, he spoke simply, his eyes finding mine with honesty that made my chest constrict. Despite facing several challenges, you remain true to yourself. I struggled to find the correct answer as my fingertips brushed over the velvety petals of the flowers. Words failed me, none of them felt sufficient. Instead, I placed the bouquet on the counter and returned my attention to him. On instinct, I placed my arms over his shoulders in an embrace that seemed both natural and unexpected. Thank you, I mumbled into his chest, my voice so faint it could scarcely be heard. This means a lot. His arms tightened around me, and his warmth enveloped me in a manner that felt both anchoring and protective. We remained there for a long time, none of us communicating, until he leaned back slightly and gently kissed my cheek. The touch lingered, leaving us with a nice feeling unrelated to the steam chamber we were going to explore. Anytime, he murmured quietly, his tone calm and steady. That evening, when we entered the Starlit Sanctuary together, I noticed a subtle change in the air between us. There was a sense of intimacy and peaceful understanding that had not existed previously. Every gaze, every fleeting contact of his hand upon mine, had greater significance. As we went about our daily activities, everything appeared to take on a more intentional tone. The steam room felt quieter, the air thick with unsaid words. Even the water in the plunge pool felt warmer, as if it contained vestiges of the tension between us. As we sat side by side in the lounge, sipping tea, Jasper stretched out and delicately touched his palm on mine. The slight motion caused an involuntary shudder to go through me. "You understand," he added, breaking the stillness. "Saturdays are the highlight of my week." I glanced to him, surprised by the calm severity in his words. "Are they?" I asked. He nodded, his eyes catching mine. "Yeah, I understand we started doing this to maintain some normalcy after everything, but now," he trailed off, his gaze falling to his hands, "now they're just significant to me." His words hung in the air, full with unsaid meaning. I had no idea how to reply, with the warmth growing through my chest, so I just nodded and murmured, "They're also significant to me." Later that night, as we were about to depart, Jasper softly took me aside near the door. The starlit sanctuary was practically deserted, with dark lighting and lengthy shadows reaching over the walls, making it feel more personal. "Hey," he whispered quietly, his hand brushing against my arm, "I've been wanting to ask, how are you?" "Really?" His question took me off guard. "I'm all right," I said reflexively, despite the fact that the words sounded empty. "Are you in?" He pressed, his gaze probing me. "Because it's fine if you are not. I want you to know I am here for you, always." His sincere tone and determined expression stunned me. A knot rose in my throat, and all I could do was nod, frightened my voice would betray me. "Come here," he whispered gently, his voice so soothing that it almost broke me. Before I could respond, he pulled me into another hug, his arms wrapped around me with such love that my chest ached. One hand rested on the back of my head, his fingers running through my hair as he pulled me close. I closed my eyes and relaxed, my cheek resting against his chest. "You're great," he said, just above a whisper. "I hope you understand that." My pulse raced, and my thoughts were a jumbled mix of feelings I couldn't sift through. When he finally drew back, his hands lingered on my shoulders, and his stare locked on mine with such intensity that it fixed me in place. Then, leaning forward, he planted another kiss on my cheek. This one lingered a little longer than was necessary. The sensation of his lips sent shivers down my spine. "Good night, Mom," he replied quietly, his tone steady and low. I watched him walk away, my pulse beating as I attempted to process what had just transpired. The boundaries that had always been so obvious between us suddenly seemed muddled, moving in ways I didn't entirely comprehend. Throughout the week, I could not stop thinking about his gestures. Every time I went by the flowers on the counter, their colorful petals reminded me of his words, his arms around me, and the feel of his kiss on my cheek. It all seemed so basic, so innocent, but definitely crucial. When Saturday rolled around again, I was filled with equal parts excitement and dread. I had no idea what to anticipate or how to handle our developing intimacy, but as Jasper met me at the door with a sweet smile and loving eyes, I felt my fears lessen. "Ready?" he inquired, his tone light but with a depth that had not been present before. I nodded and returned his smile as I picked up my luggage.